Deep in the Allegheny Mountains, there is a highway that leads nowhere. 7 tunnels carved through solid rock. 13 miles of crumbling pavement. This was once part of America's most advanced toll road. Then one day in 1968, engineers simply drove around it. Inside Sidling Hill Tunnel, if you stand in the exact center, you cannot see light from either end. Just darkness stretching 6,782 feet through the mountain. This highway was not closed because it failed. It was closed because it succeeded too well. But the story does not begin in 1968 or even in 1940 when the turnpike opened. It begins in 1881 with a railroad that was never built and a business deal made on a yacht. In 1881, William Vanderbilt controlled the New York Central Railroad. His rival, the Pennsylvania Railroad, began pushing into his territory. Vanderbilt struck back when he announced the South Pennsylvania Railroad, a competing line straight across Pennsylvania with gentler grades and shorter distances. Vanderbilt partnered with Andrew Carnegie and J.P. Morgan. By 1885, thousands of laborers were blasting tunnels through the mountains. They earned $1.25 for a 10-hour day. They bored 4.5 miles of tunnel through solid rock. Then J.P. Morgan called a meeting on his yacht, the Corsair. The railroad war was too expensive, and the rivals made a deal called the Gentleman's Agreement. Each company would stay out of the other's territory. The South Pennsylvania Railroad was abandoned overnight. Not a single train ever ran the route. The partially completed tunnels sat empty for 54 years. Local people called them Vanderbilt's folly. By the mid-1930s, Pennsylvania faced a transportation crisis. The journey from Philadelphia to Pittsburgh took 14 hours. Mountain roads had grades of 9 to 12%. There were sharp curves, no shoulders, trucks overheated, accidents were common. In 1937, the Pennsylvania Turnpike Commission was created to build a modern highway. Federal programs provided $70 million, but there was a strict deadline. The highway had to be complete by May 1940. That left just 20 months. The solution was obvious. Use Vanderbilt's abandoned tunnels. They were already blasted through the hardest part of the mountains. 15,000 workers widened the railroad tunnels for automobile traffic and paved 160 miles of 4-lane highway. They built massive ventilation buildings at tunnel portals with enormous fans to circulate air and extract carbon monoxide. The design was revolutionary. The maximum grade was only 3%. No cross streets, no driveways, no traffic signals. The Pennsylvania Turnpike opened on October 1, 1940. President Franklin Roosevelt attended the dedication. Newspapers called it America's first superhighway. It was the greatest engineering achievement since the Panama Canal. Planners predicted 1.3 million vehicles in the first year. The actual number was 2.4 million. By 1960, 20 million vehicles a year were crossing the mountains. Service plazas opened every 25 miles, featuring Howard Johnson's restaurants. The 7 tunnels became iconic. Children pressed their faces against car windows as families plunged into cool darkness. The temperature dropped 15 degrees inside. After World War II, the turnpike became the model for the interstate highway system. But that overwhelming success created a crisis. During construction, engineers made a cost-saving decision. The 4-lane highway funneled into 2-lane tunnels, 1 lane in each direction. This worked when traffic was light, but by the late 1950s, traffic had increased tenfold. Sidling Hill and Rays Hill sat just a few miles apart, creating a double bottleneck that paralyzed traffic. On summer weekends, cars idled for an hour waiting to pass through. Families sat in hot vehicles and engines overheated. Inside the tunnels, carbon monoxide hung in the air like fog. The ventilation systems could not keep up. In 1961, the commission studied 2 options: twin the tunnels by boring parallel tubes, or bypass them entirely with a new highway. They chose to twin 4 tunnels. But for Sidling Hill and Rays Hill, a bypass made more sense. The new route would curve around the mountains instead of through them. It was 9 miles longer but 4 lanes wide with modern shoulders. No bottlenecks, no darkness, no carbon monoxide. In 1964, the commission announced its decision. The 13-mile section between Breezewood and Fort Littleton would be abandoned. The towns along the old route had no idea what was coming. The town of Rays Hill sat directly on the turnpike, population never more than a few hundred, but every vehicle crossing Pennsylvania passed through. Gas stations, restaurants, motels, a small post office, everything depended on travelers. The bypass cost $17 million, but the new route ran 9 miles away, too far for anyone in Rays Hill to benefit. On November 26, 1968, the new alignment opened. Traffic was diverted, gates closed. 13 miles of perfectly functional highway became obsolete in a single day. The businesses in Rays Hill closed within months. No customers, no meals served, no guests. The post office shut down. Families who had built their lives around the turnpike had to leave. Breezewood itself faced a different fate. It became the junction where Interstate 70 meets the turnpike. But instead of a smooth interchange, traffic must exit and pass through traffic lights and commercial strips. Today, Breezewood is known as the Neon Crossroads, one of the only places in America where an interstate is interrupted by traffic lights. The irony is almost perfect. The abandoned turnpike was closed to eliminate bottlenecks, and yet the town at the end of it became one of the most infamous bottlenecks in the country. The commission fenced the abandoned section but left it standing. For decades, it existed in limbo. Not open, but not truly closed. In 2001, the Pennsylvania Turnpike Commission sold 8.5 miles to the Southern Alleghenies Conservancy for $1. The Conservancy launched Pike 2 Bike, converting the highway into a multi-use trail. Today, the abandoned turnpike operates as an unofficial trail, widely used by cyclists, hikers, and photographers who enter at their own risk. The experience is unique. A wide 4-lane highway where the center line is still visible beneath fallen leaves and moss. The tunnels remain the main attraction. Sidling Hill stretches 1.3 miles, so long that a person standing in the middle cannot see light from either end. The temperature stays around 50 degrees year-round. Water drips from ceilings and echoes carry for hundreds of feet. Rays Hill is shorter, 0.7 of a mile, straight enough that you can see the exit from the entrance. It is the only tunnel portal that lacks a ventilation fan housing, because the tunnel was short enough that engineers only needed fans at one end. Together, the two tunnels account for nearly 2 miles of passage through solid rock. Between the tunnels, the roadway stretches empty. Trees grow through cracks in the asphalt. Wildflowers bloom along the median. Wildlife has returned. Rest area buildings are deteriorating. Overhead sign gantries still stand. Exit ramps lead nowhere. Every year, thousands visit, some for cycling, some for photography, some simply to see what a frozen highway looks like after 50 years. 9 miles away, the modern turnpike carries traffic at 70 miles per hour, 4 lanes in each direction. Few drivers know they are passing above an older, abandoned version of the same route. The abandoned Pennsylvania Turnpike raises questions about permanence and progress. This highway wasn't abandoned because it failed structurally. It was abandoned because it succeeded beyond what its designers imagined possible. The 2-lane tunnels that seemed innovative in 1940 were obsolete by 1968. 28 years, less than a single generation. The story has layers. The turnpike followed the path of a railroad that was never built. Vanderbilt's tunnels from the 1880s became highway tunnels in the 1930s. Infrastructure built on abandoned infrastructure, both layers now abandoned together. The Pike 2 Bike project suggests one future for obsolete infrastructure: adaptive reuse instead of demolition. A highway that once moved 20 million vehicles a year now moves a few thousand cyclists and hikers. Both uses serve the public. What remains is a monument to a specific moment, the moment when superhighways became victims of their own success. The abandoned Pennsylvania Turnpike sits in the mountains, slowly being reclaimed by nature. Occasionally traveled, never quite forgotten. The tunnels are still dark, the pavement is still cracked, trees grow through the asphalt, and somewhere beneath the mountains, the highway waits. Empty, quiet, impossibly there. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more abandonment documentaries from across America.